In today's Leeds news, JB joins Hull City, what happened with Harry Wilson, deadline day fallout, and Ilan Meslier stays at Leeds. Morning folks, welcome back to the Leeds View for your news for Tuesday morning, the 2nd of September, the day after the night before, and an utter failure from Leeds United in the final hours of the transfer window to get Daniel Farke what he asked for and to fulfil the promises that were made. We will go through all of that in more detail today's video, as well as cover off what hasn't been said by the club, because at the time of recording, 11 o'clock, Leeds have still said absolutely nothing about the transfers coming into the club or out of the club or what happened. There's nothing being said. Absolute radio silence, which isn't acceptable in any stretch of the imagination. But we will go through all the details, and we'll start off today with the exit of Darko Gyabi. In the absence of any social media from the club yesterday, we should at least acknowledge the exit of Darko Gyabi from Leeds United. Darko yesterday left Leeds United on a permanent deal and will join Joe Gelhardt at Hull City. JB yesterday left the club and will sign a 3-year deal at Hull, but the details of that transfer have not yet emerged because, again, as I say, nothing has come out of the club. So right now we don't know what money has transferred and moved hands, but Hull are under a transfer embargo, so are not permitted to buy players for any fees. So unless there's some sort of creative accounting going on, it appears that Darko Gyabi will be leaving Leeds for Hull on a free transfer. We would like to take the opportunity to wish Darko Gyabi all the very best in his future. He came into Leeds with a lot of promise, didn't get a huge amount of game time at the club, and had a very decent loan at Plymouth last season, and he will go off back to the Championship with Hull City and join Joe Gelhardt, and we wish him nothing but success at this point and wish him all the best. But we'll move on and we'll talk about Harry Wilson and what happened yesterday with the Harry Wilson story, as reports have started to emerge about this. Mixed reports in what was an absolute disaster yesterday for Leeds United in the closing hours of the window. And depending on what side that you decide to read, the story slightly differs. But right now, credibility is not something the Leeds United ownership have in abundance. Fulham and Leeds held talks in the final hours of the transfer window yesterday to try and reach an agreement for a deal for Harry Wilson. Leeds first went in with a loan offer for a player with 1 year left on his current deal, and as you can imagine, that was rejected. But Leeds stayed at the table talking to Fulham about trying to get a permanent deal done for Wilson. Leeds were confident enough in this deal that they booked a plane and a medical, similar to what they had done with Facundo Buenanote, and similar to that situation, nobody got on the plane never took off, and ultimately the flight was cancelled. A deal sheet was then rumoured to have been submitted according to Sky Sports last night, but it has now emerged last night that Fulham had refused to sign that deal sheet and the deadline passed, and Harry Wilson remains a Fulham player. The Athletic today say that their sources have indicated that Fulham told Leeds repeatedly that their player was not for sale. The way they word it is, sources close to Fulham indicated that they made it clear to Leeds United that Wilson was not for sale. Leeds will likely claim that they've done everything in their powers to try and get this deal done, but further reports from the Fulham side don't make for very good reading. According to a Fulham insider, he states that Fulham would have accepted a £10 million bid for Harry Wilson, but Leeds United didn't offer more than 7 and refused to go above that price tag, so Fulham pulled the plug on the deal. Incredible incompetence either way you look at this, and no matter what Leeds say at this point, it's going to be very hard to believe, again, because of that utter silence that has come out of the club in the fallout from that. And we'll get some information on that at least and give you the full picture as we talk about the fallout from deadline day. Deadline day came and went, and all we have to deal with is complete and utter silence. The window started with Parag Marate saying that Leeds would spend every single penny available to make this side competitive and to give the club the best chance of survival in the Premier League. Go back to day one of the 49ers ownership of Leeds United, and Parag Marate sat down with LUTV to talk about the club, and he said that Daniel Farke didn't have a full deck of cards the last time he was in the Premier League with Norwich, but that was something the 49ers were going to rectify when we got there, as they believe that Daniel Farke could be one of the best coaches in Europe if fully backed. And the reality of it all now is Leeds finished the transfer window. Daniel Farke, for the 3rd year in a row, still does not have a new number 10 and now doesn't have the 2 creative players that he asked for just last week. Leeds ownership have decided the best course of action at this point is to bury their heads in the sand and try and wait this one out. And the fact that there isn't a press conference now for a couple of weeks and during the international break, maybe they feel that they can wait this out and ignore it and it will go away in time. But they will be reminded when they return that promises have been broken, patience wasn't rewarded, and ultimately publicly set expectations by them have been missed by some way. On deadline day, a loan bid for Emi Buendia was said to have been submitted according to Sky Sports. Leeds came out to the local media and said that they didn't put any loan bid on the table. Gustavo Hamer was consistently linked with Leeds right up until the final minutes of the window, but Leeds say they never spoke to Gustavo Hamer or Sheffield United and they never had him on a list. They also denied any interest in Krasnodar attacking number 10, Edward Spertjan, and that's the kicker for me in this. All of these players could have been players that Leeds went and got and would have offered Leeds upgrades on the current positions. And the fact that they say that they never spoke or considered any of these players, for me personally, is even worse. Maybe they should have. At least they would have been upgrades on certain positions and given Daniel Farke some attacking power and some creativity to try and mould this squad. Leeds could now rapidly pivot for a free transfer Josh Brownhill, but he's out of contract and he can pick his next move. He has been linked very heavily with Wolverhampton Wanderers. Although the move yesterday collapsed, he can take his time now and pick his next move. Hakim Ziyech, who is a right winger and Premier League level quality, is available also, but he is slightly problematic. Christian Eriksen, also available, another number 10, another creative player, but well past his peak years. And that is what is available to Leeds United should they decide to dip into the free market. All in all, the second half of the window has been a major fail for me. Daniel Farke can now say that he's not been given what he asked for, has not been backed properly, and the promises that were given to everyone have been met with absolute silence. You feel that right now there is probably a PR exercise going on behind the scenes of how they're going to manage the fallout of this, but Leeds have not spent every penny available to them and have not given Daniel Farke a full deck of cards, and hollow promises and a lack of transfer understanding has now come home to roost, and Leeds will have to seriously look at what's gone on behind the scenes, and they can't afford to go into another January window coming up and refuse to do business as they have in the last couple. So we'll see what the club finally decide to say, but again, at the time of recording, and I'm just refreshing now and having a look, there is still no statement from the club, nothing at all. It has come and gone and they have ignored it completely, and that won't sit well with the fan base. And you would imagine from a PR perspective this will be very difficult for them to come back from, and they will be reminded of everything they said publicly for a very long time. And maybe in future, don't pick up a microphone and go on Sky Sports and make promises that you can't keep. And that will always, those clips are out there from day one, from Sky Sports, from the parade. All those clips are doing the rounds right now, and they'll haunt the club. They will haunt Parag Marathe and the 49ers enterprises continually now until they do something that shows the fans that the ambition that they promise is there is actually backed up in the transfer market. Leeds have no creative players coming in. Nothing exciting is coming in. We've built a very solid foundation of this side, but ultimately didn't finish building the house. And as I said yesterday, it feels like a half-baked cake that doesn't taste very well right now. They didn't finish the job that was there to be finished, and they haven't given this side the very best chance they could have had to stay in the Premier League. And it's going to be, as Daniel Farke said 2 days ago, a very difficult season ahead. Let's move on and talk about Illan Meslier. And with 1 year left on his current Leeds United deal, Illan Meslier was expected to move away from Leeds United yesterday, and there was rumours of significant interest. Lorient were said to be interested. A plane apparently was booked to head to France, and Valencia, whose window was longer than Leeds' yesterday, were also said to have some interest in the player. But Leeds not only showed a lack of ability to get their bigger deals at the back end of the transfer window completed, but also an inability to get players off the books that were needed for sales in order to finish the transfer window. Patrick Bamford's contract was terminated, which means Leeds would pay out a substantial fee on that. Joe Gelhardt left on loan, and Darko Gyabi, at least at this point, appears to have gone on a free transfer. There may be a fee down the line for that at some point, but Illan Meslier stays at Leeds United. Some worry over the transfer window was the fact that Leeds' squad had gotten to 24 players of a 25-man squad, and if Leeds were to bring in the 2 players that Daniel Farke wanted, someone would have to leave. And now, unfortunately, the window is closed, and Leeds are 1 player short of a full squad. Leeds have 24 players in a 25-man squad, and Illan Meslier is still at the club, and if Leeds wanted to, they could register Illan Meslier now as part of their 25-man squad, which would mean that Leeds would have 4 goalkeepers out of 24 players, which is more players than they have on the right wing and more players than they have in the number 10 position. Meslier will now stay at Leeds United, and come December, he now can dictate a free transfer away from the club to any club outside of the UK. This isn't a dig or anything directed at Illan Meslier. He's a footballer. He just got to do what he has to do. But the fact that Leeds have been unable to get Illan Meslier off their books and sell him means that they will now miss out on any transfer fee. And unless they can come to a mutual agreement to cancel his contract, Leeds will now have to pay his wages for the remainder of this season and cost the club more money for a player that is absolutely not in Daniel Farke's plan. So again, top to bottom, up and down, left and right, not a good finish to the window at all. Leeds have really fallen short at a very pivotal moment. They've come into the final straight and they've tripped up and fallen and watched everybody else run past them. The fact that this season will now be categorised as an if season, if DCL and Mecha can stay fit, if Daniel Farke can prove that he's a Premier League level manager, if this squad can click together, then maybe Leeds can stay in the Premier League. But it is going to be a graft at this point going forward. And again, as Daniel Farke said, it will be a difficult season ahead. Not to say that this squad isn't good enough to stay in the Premier League. It should be. But it does make things that bit harder. They haven't managed to finish their business. We will have a podcast tonight. Myself and Paul are going to be here to talk about the fallout of the window in full and some more detail. I'm assuming that will come out between now and this evening. You would assume so anyway. We'll see what happens. Outside of that, thanks for supporting the channel. Thanks to everyone that watched yesterday and joined us yesterday in what was an absolute slog and disappointment of a day. But appreciate everyone that took time out of their day to spend it with us. That'll be it for me today, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you this evening. Talk to you later. See ya. Bye.